So I feel like we should do a little radio taiso, right? I mean, it's been a long day, and you've been bombarded, hopefully with lots of stimuli on all sorts of different topics, from female empowerment, entrepreneurship, new capitalism, defense, certainly a little bit of information overload. And I must say, I'm amazed. There was one comment from one of the earlier panelists here, who's a big-time CEO in Japan, and he said, wow, at G1 Global, I now understand what I stand for, which was quite interesting, right? Because there's a lot of things going on, a lot of issues. The world's a dangerous place. There's a lot of dislocation that appears to be going on. It's not just the COVID disruption, but it's almost like a perfect storm. If you're a doomsayer, you're right now very much in the limelight. But what we want to do with this panel is just engage you with a little bit of wisdom, hopefully, from some of the leading thinkers here. And what are the areas that they are concerned about? Where are the challenges? Where are the opportunities? And then I hope to engage, the audience into an active discussion. So, Robin, you're sitting in the center of London, big center in many different ways, at Chatham House, keen observer of global affairs, of Asian affairs. What are the issues in the world that you are passionate about, that you are concerned about, and what are the sort of one or two solutions that you think we need to focus on?
Thanks very much, Jesper. Great to be back with the group, but sadly back with the group virtually rather than physically. I look forward, as I was saying to Hori earlier, very much hope I can meet you in person next year if you keep inviting me. But it sounds like you've had a fantastic plan already. You're at the end of your day. I, like Bill, I think, are at the beginning of mine. But as you said, in London, I'm not quite sure we're in the middle of a moment. It feels like we're in the eye of the storm, maybe not as much the eye of the storm as Kiev, but in Ukraine, but we are in the eye of the storm of some of the contradictions, you might say, of what is both a post-COVID world, and it does feel a little more post-COVID here, if we're talking actually about the pandemic, but we feel like we've walked, as they say in Britain, out of the frying pan and into the fire. And there may be several more fires still to come. So let me just very quickly, because I know we want to use this time dynamically rather than just with long presentations, explain what is at the top of my mind from where I'm sitting here in London. And it's not, well, to put it bluntly, it's not COVID. I mean, the rates are going up here again, and they're, everyone's expecting that. But I'm about to have my fourth vaccination later this week. And people are kind of getting on with it here in much of Europe, which I've been traveling around quite a bit recently. Where I think all of our focus is on right now is whether we are walking into a new Cold War or even a hot war or not, and the extent to which that has all been exacerbated by COVID. A lot of people believe that Vladimir Putin's aberrant behavior, his just completely unpredictable behavior, may have been impacted by not just being a dictator who's been one in place for 20 years, but one who's been kind of shut away for a long time and maybe indulged too much in his historical revisionism. But importantly, what's happened is that this invasion of Ukraine, which I'm not going to talk about here, what it has done, and I think this is the most perhaps globally important element of it, assuming we avoid the worst type of escalation of this actual conflict, what the invasion of Ukraine has done is sharpened the strategic competition between the US and China. What it has done is forced, in a way, China to pick a side. And the side that has been picked in Beijing is the Kremlin and Moscow, partly because of Beijing's own sense of insecurity, partly because, a weaker Russia in a way would mean a weaker China in the face of a still very strong United States, and a United States that itself now sees in China a truly global strategic threat to its values and its preeminence, to put it bluntly. So what we have, frustratingly in some ways, is not the emergence of a sort of new Cold War, but we do have a grouping, I would say, of the narrative that is shared in Beijing and Moscow, that the liberal democracies, but they don't describe them as that, the kind of US-led world as they describe it, is out to dominate other powers, China and Russia in particular, and that the two of them need to confront that. And I've listened to many Chinese speakers talk about what they think they're doing, and they say, well, look, we're not siding with Russia. We're not providing Russia with weapons or military support. We're not breaking the SWIFT sanctions. Yeah, we're trading a bit more with them, but that's understandable. So is India, so are other countries. We're just trying to describe the world as it is. But if you sit in London, or you sit in Washington, or many other capitals for that matter, the fact that Beijing supports Russia's narrative means that it gives permission to the many, many other countries around the world, in fact, the majority of countries around the rest of the world, who can then say, well, we don't need to pick sides. We can carry on trading equally, if not more, with Russia, despite what's happened in Ukraine and what the kind of threats that are being undertaken subsequently. And that is a form of providing material support, because Russia is certainly not isolated right now. You could even argue that it's the West that is somewhat isolated in this conflict. Now, that's the negative side, yeah? And like we could go into the negative side as to where this might pan out. But I think there is a positive side. May seem a strange thing to say, but the positive side to my mind is that we have, for the first time in my career in international relations, a coming together of the transatlantic liberal democracies and the trans-Pacific liberal democracies. And by that, I mean the pivot or the hinge point of the United States is starting to link together its allies in Europe, Canada included, with the allies, Japan, Australia, South Korea, New Zealand, and I'm focusing on those four specifically, around what at least I'm calling an Atlantic-Pacific partnership. It's probably not a very good term, but it's the best I can come up with at the moment, because what we have is Japan, along with South Korea and other countries, wanting to show to America that they care about European security as a way of ensuring that they keep America involved in Asian security. And we've seen that in the attendance of the NATO summit in June, which singled out China as a threat. We've seen that in their imposition of sanctions against Russia. It's kind of a first time. And then we've seen on the flip side, Europeans spending a much more focus on Asian security, with Indo-Pacific strategies, with naval operations, with calling out China in a NATO communique. And this is Europeans trying to show to America that they care about Asian security as a way of really bolting in and locking in American commitment to Europe. And I think the Americans themselves have concluded that they cannot confront China if they let Vladimir Putin, in essence, win in Ukraine. So there's a sort of coming together of these two sides. And I see in some of the recent G7 meetings, which Japan has attended as well, this kind of partnership creating a sort of privileged community in some very important areas. And these are relevant to the post-COVID world, in developing rules around which to trade data. Big priority of the Japanese government from its G20 presidency. How do you trade data across borders and share data across borders, but based on liberal democratic values of protection of privacy? How do you build up reliable supply chains for vaccine technology or medical sharing? So I think there are some really positive elements emerging in there. And I think Japan is going to play a critical role in the emergence of this Atlantic-Pacific partnership, both through its role in the CPTPP, upholding those high standards as a valued security ally that takes its security responsibilities seriously, and that's linked in with Europe and the United States in high technology and in the very modern areas of development that we can do together. So I'll stop there, Jesper. That's my positive to the negative.
well, it was from the negative to the positive, but still, you're on the other side of the world. So polarization, in particular, the aggression in the Ukraine as a catalyst, to really divide the world, so to speak, right? Not necessarily between good and bad, but certainly from our perspective, yes, between good and bad, but the values of liberal democracy, of accountability, of rule of law versus something a little bit more, shall we say, imperialistic or despotic. And Japan, as was mentioned in the early panel, in the morning session, Japan sort of in the middle position, right? With a very, very important role as a potential mediator, right? Because of Japan's proximity to the People's Republic of China and of course to the United States of America. Now, she always gets angry when I call her sensei. So, sensei.
We actually should stop calling sensei among politicians. I do think it's not really healthy.
What do you recommend?
So at this panel, I'm participating here as on my behalf. So just call me Rui. That's fine. Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm really, really happy to be a member of the panel, this great closing session. And especially at this very important juncture of the history, I think as just, your homework sent last night, or maybe before, I just saw it last night, is what is the Japanese global role? And pick up the challenge you think, and maybe opportunity as well. And I truly, agree and with the Robin's point on the Asia and Europe has becoming, not the separate places, but we have so many things entangled, they're actually in common. And if you look at the history, I think what the world is facing now is very unique. If we take let's say, the Cold War between Soviet Union and the US, it's still the competition of the ideology, but it's in the same civilization. Maybe you may be, not happy. Some people may not be happy Soviet Union and US in the same civilization, but it's, and then between Hitler's Germany versus great empire, British Empire, it's also the competition of the maybe ideology you can say, but it's in the same civilization. What we are seeing now is the between China and Japan, the strategic competition. It's strategic competition, but it's also the different civilization. Asia and West Europe is very different. And I think Japan here can play a unique role. Actually, Japan has played a role, specifically the former, the passed away, but Prime Minister Abe proposed the Indo-Pacific strategy, free and open Indo-Pacific agenda is, I think, the most great contribution to the world in this place. Now that it was not just Japanese strategy, but it was employed by the US. A couple of years ago, the Hawaii, the Asia Pacific Commander, it's called. Now it becomes the Indo-Pacific Commander. And Europe, EU has issued Indo-Pacific strategy, I think. And now the UK has employed a new policy of Indo-Pacific tilt. So in many ways, the venue where the world politics is now played hard. Of course, Ukraine is one thing, but I think if you just take a huge macro view, it's in Indo-Pacific. It's a first time in the history, I think. And because of that, Japan can play a very unique role that Japan do understand, especially the most important part is that Southeast Asia, I think, the middle countries, I would call. Whether, the international community is this direction, that direction, is determined not by only US or Japan or the Europeans. It's basically where these middle countries, like Southeast Asian countries, Pacific Islands countries, where they pursue is most important. And Japan can talk to these South Asian nations because we do share the same values. Let's say human rights or the democracy doesn't sell so well in these countries because we have a very different historic backgrounds. And Japan do understand there are many different kinds of democracies and very different, levels. So how you talk to these countries, you have to have the same understanding about the development and then also the diversity of the countries. So that's Japan can do, and that's Japan is doing one already. And the other role is let's make US engaged in Asia. That's the second role. And thirdly, I do think the most important thing for Japan to do is make our country strong. The reason why I'm saying is because I'm really, really feeling a great concern over our economy and also the defense capabilities. And Japan situated uniquely, so we can play a role and we have a role to play. But my sense is Japan needs to strengthen our economy, defense, and also, with the constitutional, interpretation or any other things. Japan has many things. We are tying our hands so much, so we have to release, our unnecessary tied rope, and that's what we need to do.
Fantastic. I love your comment about Japan needs to be strong because the opponents, Russia, China, are Leninist countries. And anybody who knows a little bit about Leninism, they expect only one thing, which is force, power. If you're not strong, if you're weak, you will get run over. And that's, unfortunately, a challenge that we have to live with. Your point about Japan as a mediator, right? Because when the Cold War ended, the Americans thought everybody wants to be like us because we won. Well, that's actually not true, right? Yes, there are many admirable parts about the United States model of society, about the United States model of capitalism, but chotto fujubun, right? Just maximizing return on equity, it's a little boring, right, to a Japanese. And this idea of multi-stakeholder capitalism, right, is obviously something where Japan, has a lot to give in terms of bringing together other countries, whether they're here in Asia Pacific or elsewhere. Now, Bill, what are you passionate about in these times of crisis?
Well, thank you, Jesper. And the first thing I should mention and disclose, in a way, since you've talked about Leninism, is that I should remind you that the former Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, once pointed out that the magazine I had the honor of editing for a while was really a communist magazine. And his newspaper proved it by putting my photograph on the front page and pointing out that I look like Lenin. So I'm afraid you have a Leninist here talking to you from Dublin. But the main thing that I want to say is that the biggest challenge about the time is that we have no idea what's going on. Basically, if you think about the last few years, trade war, Trump elected, pandemic, now the war in Ukraine, global international crisis, will nuclear weapons be used or won't they, and all of that. It means that whereas a conference like this that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, might have had people like me or Jesper talking about what will the world in 2030 would look like. And the true answer was, we haven't the faintest idea. This is a time of radical uncertainty. This is a time when we cannot predict. We do not even know whether in 2 years' time the US will still be a functioning democracy. The leader of the free world could be not a functioning democracy. There was an attempted coup on January the 6th, 2021. What's going to happen next? We do not know. So this means that forecasts are no good. Preparation is everything. Preparation, planning, thinking about how to make yourself more creative. So that turns me to the opportunity. If we don't know what's going on, we absolutely need to dispense with, to throw away old rigidities. We need to build up our learning ability, our creativity, our ability to do new things quickly. Maybe the best finding out of COVID and now out of the war in Ukraine is that those Leninist societies of Russia and China are actually highly rigid societies. The old myth that the great thing about China was that they could make quick decisions, whereas we Democrats were so slow, is disproved by the chaos of the zero COVID policy, by the weakness of the economy, by the inability of Xi Jinping to change his position. So we, Japan, the UK, need to reflect on our rigidities and the way in which rigidities have held us back in the way we developed vaccines during the pandemic, in the way we do our budgets now, in the way we think about building security and defense, but also about how we unleash the creativities in our society. I think rigidity is discredited. Prediction is also discredited. So creativity is got to be the name of the game. And that's the biggest opportunity.
Creativity is the name of the game. The name of the game, the name of the game. Be flexible, be creative. Now, still, for normal leaders who run legacy companies, I mean, it's all very nice and well to talk about startups, right? Startup is nice because you start from nothing. You have an idea, you do something, everybody's excited. Wow, we're going to create a brighter future. Most companies, most people work in something that has a legacy, that is rigid, that yes, everybody understands it needs to change, but how can you engender a culture of change, particularly in a system like Japan? Because Japan's great strength is, yes, thank you, the incredible resilience. I always point out to Americans, here in Japan, real estate prices fell from a peak in 1990 all the way back down to where they were at the time of the first oil shock. Japan had destroyed more wealth during the collapse of the bubble economy than she lost during the Pacific War. Yet, unemployment never rose above 6%. There was never any time in your life here in Tokyo or anywhere else when you had to worry about your 11-year-old daughter going out late at night. So this sort of resilience is actually something that's very, very powerful. So Bill, you know, sort of in response to your thing, why not just wait it out? Yes, there's this uncertainty right now, but I've got the resources. I just keep doing what I'm doing. What's wrong with that? Robin, any comment on that?
Any comment on that? I mean, look, I think that being able to, I think that mixing resilience with creativity obviously is the magic juice. Yes, I mean, it's what you're implying in your comment there, Jesper. I believe that the one is necessary for the other, but doesn't necessarily follow. So in other words, if you don't have a sense of resilience, if you are not protected in a way, it is very hard to unleash creativity. The United States has been one of the most creative countries in the world, on the back of the fact through the post-1945 period that it has no enemies physically to the north or south. It was the undisputed power of the world. And in that space, it could become creative. Germany and Japan both unleashed their economic potential and, let's remember, their creativity, industrially and technologically, under the umbrella of American protection. The problem we have today, back to Bill's comment, and I think Rui was getting at this as well, is that we can't necessarily rely on the United States for our protection. And therefore, to be able to be resilient, we need to develop a more holistic approach to resilience. Now, geopolitically or geoeconomically, I think the EU, for all the criticism one can make about that, is a form of geoeconomic protection and resilience for Europe. It has proved its way through COVID, through the global financial crisis. I think former Prime Minister Abe's decision to move forward with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, despite not having the United States in, was a remarkable step to create a larger scale of economic resilience where you did not have to rely on the United States anymore to drive it. But if you don't have a sense of security, it is very hard to unleash creativity. And in a way, even a country like Japan, obviously I understand that the limits on creativity are linked to all sorts of other things. They may be cultural, maybe historical, societal for that matter, not least the underplayed role of women in Japanese economic and social life, which I think Rui was implying earlier on. I think that being able to get to that space of being creative is going to require a sense of confidence that you're secure. Otherwise, if you try to pursue the route of creativity without having some backup, people just don't buy into it. They don't invest in the long term. So maybe that's just the thought I'd offer right now.
No, fantastic. Sensei.
Just thank you. Creativity, and actually, I think come from the the atmosphere or the spirits to be able to challenge, things. And I think what Japan has lacked for 20, 30 years, we had it actually in 1980s. I think Japanese companies have more, I think the room for trying new things, and failure was allowed in a way, and but I think now that what Japan needs to do is, I do think we should give right person, right place, and let them do, unleash their potential. If they have ideas, let them try it. Even, and if it fails, we don't, make them shut. We should allow them to continue another challenges. That kind of society is necessary for Japan. And I think I think for security policies, what we should do is pretty clear for Japan. For Japan's part, I think Japanese defense lacks, a couple of things. So we have to reinforce it. We have to develop it. Let's say long-range missiles, or maybe new technologies in the defense industry, or like cyber or space, or those new technologies in new spheres. But what is more difficult and more needs to be creative is, I think, diplomacy. And diplomacy, Japan as an ally of the US and G7 members, we have certain, principles, but at the same time, Japan needs to have its own unique role to play, especially in Asia or Pacific islands, with islands countries or African countries. Japan has been doing that, but I think it should be more active. And that will be, in the end, helps the US and then also the European partners create in terms of creating stabilized, they're stabilizing the situation. And and then what I do think one more to add is, now that unfortunately after the Russian invasion to Ukraine, threshold of using the forces has become pretty low, unfortunately. And because that was a taboo, you see, mentioning the nuclear usage is also a taboo, but now Russia is violating and attacking so many things. We have taboo, and that was a sort of deterrence, and it's being broken. So we have to create a new arrangement of the network, and I think now it's undergoing Quad, AUKUS, and Indo-Pacific countries network, and also the European Union's, now not just the European Union or NATO, they are now trying to include a new membership of European political, I forgot the name, but it includes Turkey or the other countries that is relevant for the crisis now happening in Ukraine. So we are now restructuring the new grouping and in a new setting. So that is the creativity needs to be, I think, exercised among countries and also the individuals too, especially young people and women needs to play more role, I do think, and that will give Japan new impetus for new creativity.
I mean, it's actually scary, but everybody's awake. Everybody recognizes that business as usual is not an option. Whether you're a dinosaur company or whether you're a startup, whether you're Prime Minister Kishida or whether you're Angela Merkel. Oh, sorry, she's retired. Whether you're the German government, right? Everything needs to be rethought, and there is action because there's concrete pressure. Let's hope that that pressure is not going to get accelerated, by Mr. Putin's bad actions, right? But certainly we all recognize, right, that something new needs to happen. I want to ask you, and I'm going to start with Bill because you are the one who looks like Lenin. No, I want to ask you if you have 1 minute with Prime Minister Kishida, what would you urge him to do? And then I want to ask you to have 1 minute with the head of the Keidanren, the Japanese Big Business Association. What advice do you give, number one, to the leader of the country, and number two, to the leader of big business here in Japan?
Wow. Okay, so I think my answer to the 1 minute with Prime Minister Kishida is, first of all, I'd say, I hear that your structural wage increase plan is coming soon. Very strong strength to your elbow. Get on with it. Do it, because a high wage strategy for Japan is absolutely vital, but up to you to work it out. But the second 30 seconds would say, look, I know that the United States is a friend, but not a reliable one. You need to build your relationships, your alliances with other countries in the Indo-Pacific, including in the defense and security field, in technology, in diplomacy, in intelligence sharing. Build those relationships with as many countries as you can. Don't paint them as anti-China, but they are basically deterrence relationships. And you just go out and make friends. Raise
wages and make friends. Sounds like you and I should open a bar in Roppongi.
Exactly.
Robin, what about you? 1 minute with the Prime Minister, 1 minute with the head of the Keidanren.
I suppose, actually, I'm scribbling down here very quickly. Thank you, Bill, for jumping in the front of the line or being put in the front of the line. I was going to make a similar comment. I think Japan has a critical role to play in bringing together those countries of Southeast Asia. They are not all democracies. Vietnam is not a democracy by any stretch of the imagination. But Vietnam is not trying to undermine democracies around the world and is not trying to push some alternative model. So I think the role that Japan has established with itself, leading the Trans-Pacific Partnership and creating this comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, is critical. Keeping, as I said, a kind of privileged level of economic and potentially, to Rui's point, security cooperation will be incredibly important. I think it could also do the same with European allies. And back to Bill's comment earlier, you cannot rely on the United States in the coming years. You need it, but you can't rely on it. So building up close relationships with the EU, deepening them there with the countries like the United Kingdom, I think will be incredibly valuable for the resilience that you need to enable creativity. For the Keidanren, I think it's to follow through what a lot of companies are doing already, which is China plus one, China plus two. I understand China is the largest export market for Japan. That's probably not going to change that much in the near term. But using China as a base from which to operate globally or even regionally is going to become increasingly difficult. And so there is a confluence between the Prime Minister's strategy of focusing on Southeast Asia, Indo-Pacific, and even working out how to bring India into this mix more constructively, and the business strategy, which I think can flow behind that. It doesn't mean that you're not working with China, doesn't mean you're ignoring China. After all, Japan is also a member of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which China is part of as well, along with most of ASEAN, South Korea, Australia. But creating that privileged community that you can trust for the long term, I think is large enough in terms of geographic capacity, money, markets, people, to be able to experiment with creativity around liberal democratic values. Because what China's trying to do is be creative within the space of a unitary autocratic system, and it will not work in the long term. Whereas we have a chance to make something work that will be resilient for the long term and sustainable.
Thank you, Robin.
To Prime Minister, actually, Robin and Bill said what I also wanted to say. So I would say other thing. I will tell Prime Minister to do the summit meeting with South Korea and China. I mean, as exactly Japan located very close to China and South Korea. I mean, South Korea has changed the government, and now that President Yoon Song-yeol government can be a good partner, we shouldn't miss this opportunity to have the Japan, US, South Korean security partnership, which has been jeopardized under the Moon Jae-in government. So I hope that he can try a summit meeting with South Korean president soon. And the other thing is, I think we should have a proper communication channel with China directly too. We have a competition, we have a security concern, we have to have a deterrence, and that is clear. We're doing that, and doing that not just by Japanese or Japan-US, we do with the partners, but also we have to have the communication. So that's one thing. The other thing is category 2, COVID. Let's just normalize this to category number 5. I think our economy needs to be, all the Japanese people needs to be encouraged. Now that the normality has come into play, so let's do the business, let's do many new things, and we have to develop our economy, with a new spirit. We need animal spirit, and the leader needs to encourage that. I do hope that should be the leader's role.
Hello, Kono Sensei, come on up. I mean, I know that you talk to Kishida all the time. Does he wake you up at 3 in the morning? No, he does not. Okay, well, you should wake him up and tell him. Tell him what? If you want to tell him. Oh, what is this? I don't need this one.
Well, well, I guess someone said United States is our ally, but we are not sure what happened 2024. So we need to build some kind of framework in Asia. We don't have NATO in Asia. Maybe we need to ask NATO to expand it to Indo-Pacific, but we need to stand with 2 legs. And for Keidanren, I think they need to have some generation change. I think it's time for us to get the young business leaders, right?
Now, of course, the older I get, the more I should disagree with that statement. But, as Robbie Feldman pointed out in another session here, he has met some extremely old 40-year-olds and some extremely young 80-year-olds. I mean, it's clearly not the age, it's the question and ability and willingness to actually be curious, because that's what is needed. What do we take away so far from this discussion is there's all this uncertainty, all rules are up. There's a lot of opportunities that is being created with all sorts of new technologies happening, right? With all sorts of, new models and new thinking coming through, but at the same time, sticking to the old way of doing things, not being curious, insisting that the 19th century way is the right way of doing it. That's obviously not going to get us towards a brighter future. Bill, I'm going to pick on you again, and I'm sorry that we're jumping around a little bit, but this is G1 Global, so we talk a little bit about everything. What advice do you give a young graduate, a young high school student? If you were to mentor somebody and give him or her some advice, what should they be focusing on?
Well, I suppose advice number 1 would be come to Ireland or to the UK or to Germany or to the, if you must, go to the US, but preferably come to Europe and spend time understanding the way we are, the way we work, and then take all of that back in. You need to be the new Iwakura mission 150 years later. That would be advice number one. Advice number two would be embrace the green agenda and think about how you can make it work for you in business, in professional life, because the one thing that we know is going to be here for the long term and through your life, young woman or young man, is decarbonization, the energy transition, there's the desire to learn, to find out new ways of nuclear fusion to bring down the cost of energy. This is going to be, we know, the constant of our life, but there are enormous opportunities there. So embrace it and tell us what the future is.
It was wonderful. In one of the previous panels, there was a wonderful comment by a Frenchman, said, stop thinking about the end of the month. Start thinking about the end of the planet. That's a nice way to sort of focus. Robin, your advice to the young generation.
It's such a difficult thing to say, especially the further one gets from being part of the young generation. I think I try to remember one particular issue. I think the best work that you can do is, and the best jobs you can do, the ones you design. So what I would be saying is, yeah, by all means, commit to a specialism. By all means, commit to a job with a particular company. But do think all the time, how can I design my own work? What is it that I believe I can offer creatively? And if the job isn't in front of me, can I propose it? Can I create it? Certainly, I've had a couple of opportunities to design my own jobs in the think tank space, and it was hugely liberating, but also one of the bosses I worked with, it was one of the best things I did, because that's what the institution I worked at was lacking, was what I could see it was lacking. So while a bit like Rui, I'm going to just simply agree very strongly with Bill's comment about decarbonization, the amazing potential that technology provides now for more efficient and creative ways of creating wealth on a sustainable basis. So by all means, focus on that. Whatever you do, whichever sector you're in, don't be trapped by the job. Always think about, is there a job I can create within an institution or beyond it, or for myself? Try to keep that element or create that element of individual space. It is more satisfying. It is more powerful. Obviously, you need to be educated for that, and you need to take your time. But I think that's the track I would take.
Rui.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a 14 years old daughter. Well, another one is 9, so still too young. But I was thinking that what would I tell her if she's graduated from the high school? And I also would like to, all the young people, if they have opportunity, see the world or talk to the people of the, seek the opportunity to meet and talk to the people from different countries or different backgrounds, different cultures. And the other thing is, I would recommend, this is a very specific suggestion, maybe gather some of your friends and then try to, set up a company. Create a, just in Japan especially, it's not very difficult to have a, set up, establish a company. It's not very difficult procedure, or you don't need lots of money either. For the company must be something for the society or for Japan or for the world, for someone's sake. So I would recommend that. And whether, regardless of what kind of job in the future she or he will take, I think this experience of thinking about what I would like to do for the society or the country or the world, and would I be able to work together with your friends and do actually, try to do things is, I think, will benefit the life for the person in many ways. So I would recommend that.
I mean, this focus on entrepreneurship particularly for the younger generation. I mean, it is actually the only source of economic prosperity. I mean, you can show this over time. If you raise the number of entrepreneurs in society by 1 percentage point, your potential GDP, your potential growth rate goes up by about 0.5%. Now, for 30 seconds, my advice to the young generation would be challenge authority, because the rate of change that is going on is so fast that, for example, if you graduated from Stanford University with a degree in software engineering, and that was more than 7 years ago, you're actually out of touch. You actually do not know how to program a machine learning based, which is the latest way forward, how that actually works. So imagine that even when you're graduated from Stanford in software engineering, you're 28 years old, you're already out of date. What do you think that means for me? I'm 61. I'm so out of date. I'm back to writing letters. Anyway, but challenge authority and continue to reinvent yourself. For the prime minister, there's one piece of advice, and this is actually the great strengths that Japan has. In front of investors, I talk about Japan as a bastion of stability. Whether you like Kishida or not does not matter. He's got a 2/3 supermajority. He gets things done. Last year, 100% of the legislative proposals were turned into law. This has not happened in any other Western democracy for the last 38 years. An incredible grip on power to get things done here. So what do you need to do? We agree, massive uncertainty. So you as the government, which is stable, which is a bastion of stability, give me a long-term goal. And we all know what that goal is. The green sustainability, the new energy. So commit big money in public-private partnerships to actually make sure that Japan becomes the world's first G7 economy that has completely decarbonized itself. And don't do this by 2050, do this by 2028. This is totally possible. It costs money, but Japan does have money. That's enough for me. Let's open it up for any questions here from the audience. If you could very briefly say who you are, just who you are, right? And you've got exactly 29 seconds to ask the question. If you go over 29 seconds, as you know, it's a bottle of champagne for me and every other panelist here. So please, let's open the floor for any questions here. Dozo, we've got one over there. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take questions in sort of 2 or 3 batches. And if there's a specific person that you would like to answer the question, please do so and say so.
Thank you for today's sessions. My question to Louis-san, that I fully agree with your idea is we have to make Japan strengthen. And what is your idea is to motivate the current corporate executive in Japan, because you say that they need to challenge and the easy to fail and to redo something new. So I'd like to know your idea. Thanks.
Great. Any other question? Dozo. Pass the mic.
Romain Caillot, SIPA Partners. I'm French, so I don't mind buying champagne. I like to support the industry of my home country. No, but I'll be brief, and I'd like to ask maybe Sensei, how do you think Japan should engage with authoritarian government on a principled basis? And for example, at the moment in Asia, I think we talked about an architecture for Asia, you have a very significant political and human rights crisis in Myanmar. And so, in the context of working more closely with Southeast Asia, with ASEAN, how do you deal with a country that has completely gone off the chart when it comes to authoritarianism if you are Japan? Thank you. Do you only cash, right? Or do you
No cash. No. I want bubbles. I don't want cash. Hori-san, you had a question. Okay.
Yoshihori of Globis. My question is about the history. Well, what can we learn from history? We talked about roaring 20s, and then after the war and pandemic of Spanish flu, we saw prosperity and peace with technology and also advancement in music and art. And how can we make the Roaring 20s 2.0 after the war will be over? What should we do?
Okay, Robin and Bill, that's for you two. Sensei.
It's a very difficult question because, question number one, how to motivate the CEOs to companies to do the challenge for the company, right? And one thing is, of course, the government needs to show clear policy that this is the field where Japan would like to develop. Let's say, Japan did actually in the semiconductor in 1980s, and before that, the other industry was pretty active, and then we have to change it. So government showed a clear direction where to go. The problem is it's under the present, before it was clear, but now it's not so clear. Governments may have a right answer or maybe not. And I think the Kishida government has shown a couple of the fields that we'd like to focus on: AI or semiconductors, and green technology, and what else? The space? I forgot. I might miss some. But anyway, I do think now that we cannot just say, oh, you have to make efforts. Government needs to show the clear message of the direction and give a huge incentive like our investment. So not together with government and the civil, the private field needs to work together. That's the answer. The reason why I'm really feeling this is, for example, South Korea has very successful entertainment company, entertainment, the industry. They had this thought 20 years ago. Kim Dae-jung proposed that, oh, this should be the direction. And also the defense industry, South Korea is doing pretty good, although they made many failures in all through, but they did it. So I think now in this new era, not just the private companies do its own, government needs to show the clear direction and the money. And the other thing, to the Asian question, I was not so sure about the last part of the question. So Myanmar, if how can Japan engage in Myanmar specifically, or like a difficult crisis situation? Right. Oh, okay. I think Japan has been traditionally doing that, and I think it's right, so we shouldn't change it, even though some countries like the US criticizes. But I think they are now understanding that. Means Japanese style vis-a-vis Southeast Asian countries, let's take it, is tailor-made. You see, to Myanmar, we have Myanmar way. With Singapore, we have a Singaporean way. And that is our way. Japan do understand that there is no single one human rights standards or the democracy style. We know that there are differences and difficulties of each countries. So that is very important. And how to do it? We of course, we would like to improve it, or we would like to make situation better. Japan tried to achieve it through the dialogue, not by oppressing something. Although Myanmar case or some, like a clear human violation case and recognized by the United Nations, it's a different thing. We will follow that. So, but simply my point is, it's tailor-made. That is most important.
If I can top up not on the diplomatic issue, but on the issue of the government engagement. There's actually something very interesting that has happened in the last 3 months in Europe. Whether we like it or not, defense spending is going to go up, right? So how do you do it? Is it the old style baramaki, right? The old style handing out of favors to your old cronies? Or do you get creative? And there is 5 European governments who've actually set up large-scale venture capital funds that are managed by private citizens, right, to actually find the best new technologies for military and potential dual-use application. So thinking outside of the box, right, and actually engaging the private sector, with providing backing by the government, right, because it's a good bet that defense spending for the foreseeable future is going to be increasing, so there's money there. But how do I make sure that that money is actually being invested and allocated in a way that serves, yes, the military, but also, the civil society? So that's something where I think we can learn. Now, the big question to our great historians from England and from Dublin. Robin, any response? What can we learn from the Roaring '20s, and how can we make sure that we get the good times, but not the bad times?
Well, sorry, your phrase reminded me that the Roaring '20s led to the Warring '30s and '40s. So, the Roaring '20s is not something I'm sure, it was a flash in the pan, as we say over here. It was a moment of hyper reaction to a moment of hyper tragedy and oppression of the First World War. So much is different. The demographic patterns right now in Europe in particular, but in Asia as well, mean that you can't create opportunity around sort of mass employment operations. There isn't the kind of heavy industrialization that was possible at that time. The problem with the '20s is we did not invest in institutional stability, either within our societies politically, as we saw in continental Europe in that time, and we didn't have the alliances that created a firm infrastructure for long-term sustainable economic growth. Instead, the League of Nations collapsed. There was no United Nations. There was no transatlantic alliance, etc. The US wasn't involved. So in any case, Jorge, as you could tell, the long way of saying is I feel the '20s were something that worries me actually more than that inspires me. And I think rather boringly, I will go back to my mantra before and the lessons I learned from that period, which is that we need to have an institutional structure that provides predictability and sustainability for economic interaction that is socially well-grounded. That means, as I said, having an alliance structure where those countries that are firmly understanding of what the values are that unite them know that they can help each other. And we have that emerging between European liberal democracies, the United States for the moment, but Canada, Japan, Rui's point about trying to open bridges with South Korea is so important, Australia. And there are other countries, as Rui also mentioned, that may not be pure democracies, but are drifting in the right direction, are certainly supportive of opportunity for those people. We need to link them together in more predictable structures, so you have the infrastructure in which creativity can then be unleashed. Having done that, I'm with I think everyone else who said this, the green agenda. The green agenda, I was at a conference yesterday, somebody from the private sector, financial institution said, there is plenty of money. The money to do a truly transformational and therefore employment creation job is there right now in the green sector. But governments need to provide regulatory predictability and tax clarity, including a carbon price. Without that, we won't have this amazing opportunity to unleash our business creativity in a way that's sustainable for our societies and sustainable for the planet. So, that's my one call. Maybe, Japan in particular can set an example in that space.
Fantastic. Bill?
Well, the only thing I would add is that after wars finish, and by the way, we don't know how this war is going to finish, but after wars finish, there is an opportunity for a reset. And what history tells us is that sometimes those resets go wrong, as they did after 1918. Sometimes they go better. And if this war finishes, it will finish because of some kind of collapse in Russia, some kind of change of regime in the Kremlin, and that will lead to a definitive end. The most important thing to do after that will be to talk to China, to basically get countries of all kinds all around the world, yes, building institutions, but the most critical aspect will be talking to China, not in a triumphalist way, but saying, now, come on, you signed a joint document with Russia in February saying that you were against a certain way of running the world. Now, let's try to make a better way of running the world, be multilateral, but especially understand each other and deal together with climate change. If we don't talk to China, then nothing's going to happen that's good.
Fantastic. Now, I apologize to our members in online. We've run over time, which is kind of inevitable, right? With this sort of huge panel. I'm not even going to attempt to summarize anything. I think, all of you hopefully have had a very, very fruitful day here. I certainly walk away, certainly not just from this panel, but this panel as well, actually quite encouraged. In the sense that, yes, there are issues, yes, there are threats, yes, there are enormous uncertainty, but there's also a great deal of positive energy that has been catalyzed, right? And similar to what we had in the 1920s, right? There is a sigh of relief. There is great new technological diffusion, whether that's in the biosciences, whether that's in the robotics area, whether that's in the digital world. And there is even a common goal. And that common goal is, yes, start doing something about the potential end of the planet, because we do need to decarbonize. And that's, in the beginning session, somebody said a very wise word, in relations with the People's Republic of China, which is what at the end it's going to come down to, right? Cooperate where you can, compete where you must. And the area of cooperation in this post-COVID, in this hopefully soon post-European war scenario, opening up these channels of cooperation, agreeing that, yes, you are China, we are Japan, we are Germany, we are America, but we're all part of one mankind. And we do own it to our children, to our grandchildren, to actually make sure that the planet is still going to be around, is still going to be inhabitable, and is still going to be a fun place to go partying on a Saturday night. Something like that. Thank you very, very much. And we hope very much to see you this time next year. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you.